Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. Street racing isn't just about speed, it's a lifestyle. And for Jeff AZN Bonnet, it's been a lifelong passion that took him from the gritty streets of Oklahoma to the national spotlight on Street Outlaws. Alongside his partner and longtime friend, Sean Farm Truck Whitley, AZN became part of a duo that delivered not only high-octane races and jaw-dropping car builds, but also a unique energy that captured the hearts of fans across the country. Their chemistry, born from genuine friendship and a mutual obsession with cars, made them stand out even in a world filled with larger-than-life personalities and relentless competition. But as thrilling as the street racing world may be, it also comes with its own dark side. The risks are real, the consequences often severe. AZN has faced his fair share of setbacks and challenges on the road, but one tragedy in particular left a lasting mark, not only changing the course of his career but reshaping the way he approached life itself. AZN's story begins long before the fame. Born on August 3, 1981, in Oklahoma, he grew up in a household that was as diverse as it was grounded. His mother, Matsu Bonnet, originally from Taiwan, brought a strong cultural influence and discipline to the family, while his father, Dennis Bonnet, was a tough, principled U.S. Army veteran who had served during the Vietnam War. From an early age, AZN was surrounded by the world of cars. Whether it was tinkering with engines in the garage, hanging out with older gearheads, or sneaking peeks at illegal street races, the seeds of his passion were planted early and deeply. His first car, a 1964 Chevy 2 Nova, was more than just a teenager's ticket to freedom. It symbolized his first true investment in the racing world. Purchased in high school with a $2,800 loan from his dad, the Nova became his mechanical playground and emotional anchor. At first, it had a modest inline-six engine paired with a 3-on-the-tree column shifter, hardly a race car by any measure. But that didn't stop AZN from pushing its limits. Every day was a lesson in control, timing, and patience. He learned to coax the best out of that old motor, even if it meant a lot of stalling, grinding gears and embarrassing stops on hills. Those early drives were less about speed and more about understanding the nuances of how a machine breathes and reacts. Eventually, though, he did what any self-respecting gearhead would do. He tore out the six-cylinder and replaced it with a 383 small block V8. The build wasn't fancy, but it was functional and powerful. With GM Vortec heads and a scat bottom end, the Nova transformed from a teenager's beater into a legit street bruiser. That car saw it all. It was the first one he took to the strip, the first one that got him pulled over, and even the one he once defended in a parking lot fight. At one point, he literally took a punch to the face over it, but AZN wasn't about to let a lack of funds slow him down. His hustle kicked in early. Noticing that most homes had poorly visible address numbers on the curb, he figured he could fix that. Literally. He'd leave handwritten notes in mailboxes offering to paint house numbers on curbs so emergency services could locate homes faster. Just leave an envelope of cash and he'd do the job. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid for parts. Learning to drive that Nova, however, wasn't all smooth sailing. His dad, despite his love for cars, was not the most patient teacher. AZN often jokes that his dad's nerves made the whole process more chaotic than educational. There were arguments, stalling fits, and more than a few close calls. But even though the lessons were rocky, the bond they built through that car became a foundation for AZN's confidence. Over time, the lessons sunk in, and what once seemed impossible began to feel natural. He'd take the Nova out every day, looping around the neighborhood, pushing a little farther each time until he felt at home behind the wheel. He even mastered the nerve-wracking challenge of stopping on an incline in a manual transmission car, an early badge of honor for any driver. Those formative years weren't just about learning to drive. They were about learning who he was. The street became his proving ground, not just as a racer, but as a hustler, a mechanic, and eventually, a personality. Every rev of the engine, every spin of the tires, brought him closer to the man who would one day make waves in the street racing world. But while his journey began with that Nova and a dream, no one, least of all AZN, could have predicted the triumphs and heartbreaks that would follow. Of course, not everything about that Nova was smooth. As much as it symbolized freedom and passion, it also came with its fair share of embarrassing moments. At one point, the car developed a mysterious leak, something AZN didn't fully understand at the time, which made for some pretty awkward situations, especially on dates. Imagine pulling up to impress someone, only to have your car leak fluid all over the driveway. It didn't help that the bushings in the transmission were worn out, causing the gear shifter to lock into second gear unexpectedly. There he'd be, mid-date, trying to explain why the car wouldn't move properly, then crawling under the car to fix it by hand, getting greasy and frustrated in the process. It wasn't exactly a great way to win someone over. But that's part of what makes your first car so meaningful. It teaches you humility, patience, and persistence. AZN often says that your first car shapes what kind of car guy you become. Some people get hooked on aesthetics, lowering suspensions, adding custom paint jobs, tricking out interiors. Others become engine junkies, obsessed with building more horsepower. Then there are those who get addicted to the adrenaline of pure driving. For AZN, it was about making cars faster, not just on paper, but in reality. He cared about how the car responded, how it felt, how much more he could get out of it with the right tweaks. That Nova sparked something inside him, an obsession not just with speed, but with mastery. But as his passion grew, so did the emotional weight he carried. At just 16, AZN faced the loss of his mother to cancer. She had been his biggest supporter, a grounding force in his life, and losing her created a vacuum he didn't know how to fill. The grief was intense and isolating. Just a few years later, in 2001, tragedy struck again when his father passed away due to a faulty heart valve. The man who taught him to drive, who helped him buy that Nova, and who instilled in him the values of resilience and determination, was suddenly gone. Losing both parents before even reaching adulthood left a scar that would never fully heal. It's a type of grief that doesn't disappear. It just becomes part of you. It was around this time that AZN met someone who would change the trajectory of his life. Sean "Farm Truck" Whitley. At the time, Farm Truck was already a street racing legend in Oklahoma City. Hungry to prove himself and driven by a need to feel connected to his father's memory, AZN challenged Farm Truck to a race. He lost, but in doing so, gained something far more valuable. Farm Truck saw something in the young racer, a fire, a sense of purpose, and took him under his wing. The two developed a friendship that transcended racing. Farm Truck became a mentor, a partner, and in many ways, a second father figure. Their connection was real, built not on ego, but on trust, shared experiences, and a mutual love of cars. That bond would eventually lead them to national recognition. In 2013, AZN made his official debut on Street Outlaws, a show on the Discovery Channel that brought the raw, underground world of street racing into homes across America. The show was more than just a competition. It was a lifestyle showcase. Oklahoma City became the epicenter of a new wave of racing culture, and AZN, alongside Farm Truck, became one of its most recognizable figures. With their dynamic personalities, comedic banter, and relentless drive, the Farm Truck and AZN duo quickly became fan favorites. But Street Outlaws wasn't just about who crossed the finish line first. It was about the people behind the wheel, their stories, their struggles, and what drove them to keep pushing forward. And for AZN, every burnout, every race, every build was fueled by something deeper: love, loss, and the unshakable desire to keep moving forward. It was always about more than racing. Street Outlaws brought the adrenaline, sure, but what made it truly entertaining was the dynamic between Farm Truck and AZN. Farm Truck played the calm, calculated strategist behind the wheel, experienced, tactical, a quiet force who always had a plan. AZN was the spark, the mouthpiece, the personality that turned every race into a moment. With his quick wit, relentless trash talk, and animated energy, AZN gave fans something to laugh about even when the competition was deadly serious. Their cars weren't flashy or polished. They were sleepers, beat-up-looking machines like farm trucks. C10 pickup that looked like they belonged in a junkyard. But under the hood, they were monsters. That was the appeal. It was raw, real, and unexpected. At some point, AZN made a decision he would later regret. He sold his beloved 1964 Chevy 2 Nova. Life was changing, and at the time, parting with the car felt like the responsible thing to do. But the moment he handed over the keys, something shifted. There was a weight to that decision that he hadn't anticipated. The Nova wasn't just a car. It was a connection to his past, his parents, his roots. Letting it go felt like closing the door on a part of himself. The regret gnawed at him over the years, and eventually he found himself on a mission to track it down. He managed to locate the old VIN on an insurance card and followed the trail all the way to North Carolina. But beyond that, everything went cold. Every lead fizzled out. The people he spoke to weren't forthcoming. It was as if the car had vanished. While AZN was hitting dead ends, Farm Truck was quietly orchestrating something incredible. With a little help from local police contacts, he managed to track down the Nova's owner. Without letting AZN know a thing, Farm Truck pulled off the ultimate surprise. He brought the Nova home. When AZN found out, it wasn't just emotional, it was life-changing. He knew then that it was time to rebuild the car, not just fix it, but complete it, not just as a restoration, but as a tribute to where it all began. He turned to Church Boys Racing, a team known for their craftsmanship and dedication to detail. The plan was ambitious: a roll cage, widened rear wheel wells, a new rear differential that works. The car was stripped down to a bare shell, no engine, no transmission, a gutted interior, just the frame of something once loved, waiting to be reborn. What AZN didn't realize was that the people around him weren't just helping, they were invested. For over a year and a half, Farm Truck, Lou from 405 Photo, and Chuck from Church Boys Racing worked in secret, building the Nova in total silence, while AZN remained unaware. Every nut and bolt, every panel, every choice was made with care and respect. The car received all new front fenders, turn signals, headlight bezels, and reinforced bumpers, because even with elite-level brakes, the team knew safety was key. Cody Black laid down a perfect coat of PPG red paint, deep and gleaming. The Nova wasn't just rebuilt, it was elevated. It became the car AZN had always dreamed of, but never had the chance to build. When the moment came, and AZN saw it for the first time, he was speechless. It was more than metal and rubber. It was a realization of a vision he'd shared with his father, now completed by the people who had become his family. But as any gearhead knows, projects evolve. AZN eventually sold the Nova again, this time with peace in his heart, and moved on to new builds. One of the most eye-catching was his 1972 Datsun 240Z, nicknamed the Disco Z. Flashy, bold, and built to stand out, the Disco Z was a celebration of style and speed. Then there was the Dung Beetle, a rust-covered 1966 VW bug sleeper that, despite its appearance, packed a ridiculous 1,000 horsepower turbocharged engine capable of reaching speeds over 200 mph. It was the ultimate troll, a car that looked like junk but could smoke anything on the street. Still, when asked about his favorite ride, AZN often brings up his 2008 Jeep Grand Cherokee SRT8. Unlike the rest, it wasn't a project built for the track. It was built for life. He calls it the perfect 10, a daily driver that could do it all. For AZN and Farm Truck, a daily driver has to be more than functional. It needs cargo space, passenger comfort, and power. No compact cars, no frills. The Jeep checked every box. All-wheel drive, Brembo brakes, a serious aftermarket following, and the kind of performance that could easily rival sports cars. It wasn't flashy, but it was capable. A vehicle that could hit 200 mph if it needed to and still handle a grocery. Run. Most of their daily drivers never make it on the show, but that doesn't mean they're overlooked. In fact, AZN jokes that no car in their garage ever stays stock for long. A regular ride might show up as a beta one week and come out the other end, a fire-breathing sleeper. It's just who they are. For AZN, every car, whether it's a race, build, or a daily driver, is a canvas. And the real art is in turning something ordinary into something unforgettable. The plan was never to mess with the Jeep. At least, that's what AZN told himself. But plans rarely survive the first spark of real inspiration, especially when horsepower is involved. At the PRI show, surrounded by some of the best minds and machines in performance automotive culture, AZN met the crew from Modern Muscle. That meeting changed everything. They looked under the hood of his Grand Cherokee SRT8 and saw not just potential, but opportunity. They proposed an idea he couldn't ignore. What if this already powerful SUV became a true monster? When they mentioned they had a 405 cubic inch engine ready to drop in, matching the famed Oklahoma City area code, it felt like fate. That number meant something to him. It was more than displacement. It was identity. From there, the build was on. The factory 376 cubic inch engine was swapped out for a beefed up 405 inch Hemi. But that was just the beginning. To support the boost and power goals, they added Edelbrock heads, top-tier internals from Marley, and a D1X Procharger, an aggressive supercharger capable of pushing serious air. But horsepower means nothing without support. So the team upgraded everything behind the engine too. A Paramount Performance Stage 5 transmission built to handle extreme torque, axles from the driveshaft shop, and custom tuning. All of it came together to create something special. An all-wheel drive 5,500-pound SUV that could launch like a sports car and cruise like a king. It was refined, fast, and still road-friendly. That build took the Jeep from a daily driver to a fire-breathing juggernaut. But AZN's appreciation for the Jeep didn't peak on the dyno. It came during the 2017 cross-country road trip to Fontana, California, for the inaugural mega race. He and Farm Truck took off from Oklahoma City with cameras rolling, heading west for a showdown that would air on Discovery before the start of Street Outlaws Season 9. Their opponents? Aaron Kaufman and his crew, famous from Fast and Loud, bringing a completely different philosophy to the table. Kaufman's world revolved around flipping, fabrication, and design. AZN and Farm Truck's world? Pure racing. The stakes were massive, and everything about the trip had the potential to implode. Long days, high-pressure filming, and a big showdown, waiting at the end. Yet what could have been a stressful grind turned into one of the most iconic trips of AZN's life. The open road, the laughs, the unexpected detours. It reminded him why he fell in love with cars in the first place. Even with the show, the fans, and the fame, those are the moments that matter most. Long stretches of highway, engine humming, windows down. He's got a deep love for his Nova, but road trips aren't about nostalgia for him. They're about the now, about movement, about not standing still. He remembers the past but doesn't live in it. Each trip is the best one until the next one. Still, some things do hold deep meaning. Route 66 is one of them. Growing up near it, he knows it's history, how it's more than just a stretch of road. It's a culture, a rite of passage for car lovers. The local cruise scene around Oklahoma, from tasty freeze pit stops to late-night sonic hangs, keeps that spirit alive. But fame complicates things. These days, he can't just roll up and blend in. People recognize him. Cameras come out. A casual. Night becomes a full-on event. That level of recognition changes how you experience car culture. The anonymity that once let him sit back, chill, and talk shop is mostly gone. After the mega race aired, Street Outlaws Season 9 kicked off. And that crossover moment between the two Discovery shows was more than just programming strategy. It was a statement. It marked one of the first times that two top-tier automotive series were pitted head-to-head. On paper, they were both about cars, but in practice, they couldn't be more different. Fast and Loud focused on business, profit, turning rust into cash. Street Outlaws was raw, No glitz, just streetlights and rubber on asphalt. The clash wasn't just between racers, it was between ideologies. And that's why it captivated audiences. The competition brought chaos. Tensions flared. Viewers were hooked. But through it all, something important happened. Friendships formed, bridges were built. What started as a challenge became a meeting point for two corners of car culture that rarely crossed. That kind of unpredictable energy is what fuels Street Outlaws. It's not just about burnouts or finish lines. It's about the people behind the wheel, the choices they make, the stories they carry. That's why Street Outlaws has resonated so deeply. It introduced millions to a lifestyle they didn't even know existed and showed them why it matters. It's built a movement and sparked a cultural shift that goes far beyond drag strips and city streets. Street Outlaws has turned underground street racing into something almost mythic. A high-octane world full of grit, rivalry, and heart. The show's popularity exploded, making it a household name. Fans across the globe know the racers by name, and Farm Truck and AZN have become two of the scene's most iconic figures. They never expected this level of recognition, but they don't take a second of it for granted. Fame hasn't watered down their authenticity. If anything, it's amplified their drive to keep pushing boundaries. And when the opportunity came to leave the familiar streets of Oklahoma and take their skills international, they didn't hesitate. In 2017, Farm Truck and AZN traveled to Australia to experience Summer Nats, one of the wildest automotive events in the world. They didn't just roll in as tourists. They dove headfirst into the madness. Summer Nats is unlike anything in the States. It's a spectacle where burnout competitions are treated like full-scale sporting events. The builds are intense. Reinforced chassis, massive horsepower, custom suspension, and tires designed to be annihilated. It's about more than just spinning wheels. It's about who can create the most chaos in the most controlled way. More smoke, louder engines, total mechanical carnage, and the crowd feeds off every second of it. By 2018, Farm Truck and AZN were no longer just watching, they wanted in. They teamed up with students at the Canberra Institute of Technology and built a purpose-driven burnout C10 truck, a near twin to their iconic OKC machine, but with one major difference. This thing was built to melt tires, not just race. Under the hood sat a supercharged LS engine, primed for violent tire shredding performance. They weren't just there to represent the US. They were there to show what American street racers could bring to the international stage. The burnout run was intense from the start. Farm Truck took the wheel, punched the throttle, and launched the truck into a wall of smoke. The engine screamed, rubber vaporized, and the crowd lost its mind. But then a misstep, a light bump against the wall. Not a big deal at first, but on the next pass, a harder hit bent the steering. The truck was done for the day. Disappointed, sure, but no one got hurt, and the message was clear. These guys were here to play, and play big. Their reputation remained intact, and they earned massive respect from an entirely new corner of the car world. The experience abroad only boosted their momentum, setting the stage for the launch of their own Street Outlaws spin-off, Farm Truck, and AZN, which premiered on January 10th, 2022. The show leaned into their unique chemistry, showcasing not just the races, but also the hilarious pranks, outrageous builds, and behind-the-scenes moments that fans craved. Whether it was transforming junkyard vehicles into sleepers or taking part in over-the-top automotive challenges, the show let their personalities shine through in ways that resonated with a wide audience. Outside of TV, AZN continued expanding his footprint in the automotive world. He made a guest appearance on Garage Rehab, helping struggling shops rediscover their spark. He and Farm Truck also launched the FNA Firehouse, a full-blown brand offering merch, gear, and everything that represents their lifestyle. It wasn't just about selling t-shirts, it was about sharing a culture, and fans showed up in droves, proudly wearing the logo that represented passion, hustle, and that no-quit attitude. Now at 42, Jeff AZN Bonnet has built a legacy, but he's not slowing down. He's still racing, still building, still showing up with the same energy that got him into this world as a teenager wrenching on his Nova. He's lived through loss, battled through hardship, and come out the other side stronger. Today, to fans around the world, he's more than a racer. He's proof that chasing your passion relentlessly can take you places you never imagined. He's a legend, not just for what he drives, but for how he lives.